I'm living the Subaru owner's dream. I'm standing out here in the forest with a Forester. I'm learning to live with the nuances of this exotic body shape. It's great for hauling, it's great for putting things in it, and it's great for living life. Let's take a look. Welcome to the Forester video. I'm on the interior space, and as you saw from the montage, you may not think this is the most attractive vehicle ever. And the Forester has never been about being pure sex appeal. It's about pure utility and functionality. And the interior space is also all about that. The 2019 Forester ushers in a new era. It is probably the most aesthetically appealing interior design they have ever done, which I can appreciate. You have different lines, you have stitching, you have different textures, the vent design. It doesn't look overly generic. The door card area or door panels have leather coating and some plastic with this textured material. The feel and quality and solidity of most of the plastic parts are much better than what Subaru's done in the past, and you can tell this was something they definitely tried to improve here. So huge pro. Now when you look at the rest of the interior space, there is some chintziness, like this silver plastic by your knee area. It is totally loose. There's a huge gap here. It doesn't feel like it's well put together. And then you have some of the other plastics just feel cheap, like your entire center stack screen where the infotainment is, or the primary infotainment, is all scratched up. The piano gloss plastic area is scratched, and you know, I mean, there's just trade-offs with this for the price. Now I'm looking at the limited version, which is kind of almost to the higher end at about $32,000. You don't have everything in here, but you have most of the stuff that you would want. Now it's time to talk about usability and how comfortable this damn vehicle is. The front seats are so softly bolstered. I was driving this thing for like over 2 hours when I was filming, and I never had any fatigue. The adjustability is just good enough to get most people comfortable. You have a two-way lumbar support, which is just basically forward or back and in and out. And the back seats are good too. Even if you have these front seats farther back, you're gonna fit most people back there. 4, super comfortable. 5, a little bit tighter, like most vehicles. The hatch area is where this thing is a big win. It has such a huge mouth that you can jam anything in it, regardless of size. And the cargo cover beam is designed where it can be cleverly hidden in the floor. And I think, again, you're buying this for practicality, usability, without having to go to an SUV. And I think it does it pretty much better than anything else, and that's why the Forester has been so ridiculously popular. Now, the biggest thing that I love is visibility. There's a ton of glass in here. It means I don't have to constantly do this, being blocked by pillars or windows that are this big for, you know, like a lot of the vehicles are for style. I can see out of this easily. The somewhat larger moonroof makes this feel more open. And when the weather's good, you feel a good connection to your environment. And that's also one of the main reasons why I like driving this so much. All right, let's get into the negatives. And here it goes. Subaru was in the middle of designing this, and they got to a point they're like, we did it. This is the best thing we've come up with. And then the safety team came and said, wait a second, you forgot to put the lane departure and the cruise control buttons on the steering wheel. And then they said, well, you forgot to put this on there and that on there. And then what you get On the inside of this is a steering wheel littered full of buttons that make no logical sense whatsoever. You have your info set buttons tacked onto the bottom, your steering wheel heater tacked onto the bottom, you have your S and I drive modes jammed on here, you have forward and back buttons that you don't know if it's track selection or menu selection, your source and info button, and then you have all the buttons by your left knee, which are somewhat logical, at least they're physical, but I guarantee you 90% of people are gonna have to look up what this SRH off is. And I mean, some of it is just nonsensical. And then we get to the display screens. And I talk about this on a lot of cars. If you don't know how to integrate things together, you are gonna have a disaster on your hands, and that's what they have. You have a center screen that's in the middle of the gauge cluster. And you get through that with these little tacked on arrows at the bottom of the wheel. It tells you your tire pressure, your auto stop start mode, which this has like one of the worst auto stop starts in history. When this car turns off at a stoplight and turns back on, I had shit fall off the dash on me. It just vibrates so much. And then really, you have a sub menu to kind of turn things on and off with the safety system. Then you go to the second display, which is on the upper dash section, which other Subarus have. And then you have to control that using the info button on the upper part of the steering wheel. And then you scroll through with that. It gives you a bunch of things like weather and a compass and an analog clock and a bunch of crap you're never going to use. And then you have the option to hold down info and then turn off the display if you choose to not be distracted by it. The problem is when you decide to turn off that display up there, you can no longer see what the temperature of your interior is when you adjust your HVAC controls. You just have no idea because all of that information is up here instead of where the HVAC is. And it's a big fail on that part. So if you get done with that screen, pretty much nothing's connected between these three screens besides maybe the Bluetooth info. Your primary infotainment screen, or Starlink 3. Now this is a mixed bag for some owners. Some people have had nothing but problems with this. I've only had one freeze up, and I found that by turning off Wi-Fi and the hotspot on here, it was quick, stable the whole time I used it. And pretty much I bounced through maps, my Bluetooth connection, audio settings, all that, and it seems to be super quick. The black levels are pretty good, the color is vibrant, and the contrast levels are good, and it has a very solid, it feels like your typical capacitive type touchscreen that you're used to on a phone, just a very solid surface. You have most of the physical controls that you need here, your volume and tuning knob. Menu jumping's quick. I haven't had much of a problem with this. I think they're on the right path with that, but they have to figure out how to integrate all these screens and balance some of the physical controls, because as it stands right now, this is the biggest turnoff of this car, is all of this crap. All right, there's so many other things to talk about the interior, but I can beat it into the ground. Bottom line is, you got to get in here for yourself and figure out if some of these things are going to blow you away or turn you away. But let's take this thing into the shop, take a look at the underbody, and then take it for a drive. Now is your opportunity to have a look at the new Forester on the BenPack lift. And what you're looking at here is Subaru's global platform. This is new, and they've spent over $1 billion engineering and designing this new chassis. And of course, it's not just for the Forester. It's going to be on all their new vehicles, like the Crosstrek and more. And the reason they do this is to make vehicles easier to manufacture, cheaper, more capable and flexible to make modifications. If you want to design a new model or make changes, you don't have to tear it down and you don't have to rebuild it from the ground up. You can just take bits and pieces and modify it from there. Pretty much every manufacturer that wants to stay in business is doing this. But one of the main reasons why they had to re-engineer this is for safety. This is one of the safest designs they ever had. And if you look at the entire structure, it's more pear-shaped, designed to crumple properly, to absorb impacts and massive hits, which is what people want. You don't want to die in a crash. But when you look at everything else, this looks to the untrained eye like standard Subaru stuff. Stamped steel, everything. Strut front suspension, stamped steel front carrier. You still see your traditional symmetrical all-wheel drive setup here that Subaru's been known for. And They built this platform also to utilize that. They're not going to front wheel drive like many other manufacturers, and that's one of the highlights of this. But let's take a look at the all-wheel drive system and the rear half. In the back half of the Subaru Forester, you're going to see what you've seen for a long time. Double wishbone rear suspension. Your upper A-arms are cast steel. The rest of the lower control arms are stamped steel. Your subframe carrier is stamped steel. And you have aluminum knuckles. Now, all four corners of this vehicle get equal length half shafts. The rear differential is tidily tucked up here, so you're not going to make road or ground contact with it that easily. And you have a ton of ground clearance on this, and you totally notice it when you put it on the lift. It's almost truck-like. But pretty much everything else looks like standard Subaru stuff, from the body adhesives, the body sealers, all of that. Now, the big thing to talk about is the all-wheel drive system, so I'm going to get into that. On the Forester, you get the active torque split all-wheel drive setup. And as I stated right from the start, Subaru designed this platform with all-wheel drive in mind. It's built around this entire system. It's not like a lot of the competitors where they build a front-wheel drive architecture and then slap an on-demand system in the back for people that want to upgrade. Doesn't matter which Subaru you get this. And one of the benefits are dynamically it's set up proper. And that's why, one of the main reasons why Subaru people or customers keep going back to this. It's very unique. With the case, or the transfer case, speaking of that, it's able to do some torque vectoring between the front and the rear. So if it's constantly keeping the torque split about 60-40, 60 to the front, 40 in the rear, and it can pull away torque and move it as needed. So if you start to break traction in the front wheel, it will transfer it to, from one wheel to the other. It can transfer power to the back. It can almost go into a lockup mode on uphill slippery conditions. And with the X-Drive mode, well, depending on what model you get, you can kind of choose between how you want the all-wheel drive system or the transfer case to work. So if you're in muddy conditions or snow and you want to almost go into a four-wheel drive lock, you can do that with Subaru's system. It's very dynamic. It definitely is one of the best. Well, it's certainly, let me just put it this way, it's the best in its price range. At this starting around $24,000, it's really hard to beat for people that have the use of this or want to use it for what it's designed for. Now, let's get this on the road and cut out all the antics with the technical stuff. Getting behind the wheel of the new Forester, there's something I like to talk about, and it's that the Forester has the ability to ride excellent over every pavement surface. Potholes, bumps, undulations, cracks on the road from winter weather driving, and the fact that it will handle every condition, rain, snow, mud, you name it. This is a true all-season vehicle for people that live, at least in the United States, everywhere in the United States. You can't just say, well, it's going to do better here than others. Now, granted, this is not something that's going to blow you away in terms of handling. It's on the softer side, but that's also what makes it vastly more comfortable than a lot of vehicles. You just cruise around and you have this almost luxury car sense of smoothness. Now, of course, I said this in the interior part, it's not the quietest vehicle, and that's because you have a ton of glass in here. But this is also great for somebody that wants better visibility, and if you're willing to trade off a little bit of wind noise for that, well, this is your car. Now, handling, despite my water bottle flying around, the handling is pretty soft. I'll be real about it. Despite its all-wheel drive system, pulling you out, you feel a lot of body roll. And I'm okay with that because you're not going to be driving this like that. But the all-wheel drive system is extremely dynamic. To me, it feels much more dynamic than your typical on-demand all-wheel drive systems like you'd find in the CR-V or the RAV4, the CX5. Now, in terms of traction, you never have an issue with that. And depending on, obviously, on the dry, you're never going to have issues with traction getting off the line. Even in the wet, the all-wheel drive system with its torque vectoring in the front, or the way it's able to control its power, is quite good. This is a naturally aspirated Subaru, which means there's no turbos here. And it does have a lot of torque off the line. I will give it that. There's not that sluggish CVT feeling that you typically get with other cars. If I had to pick one really annoying thing, it would be the transmission. This CVT does a good job just tooling around town, but when you accelerate, it tries to simulate fake gear changes, or it essentially is fake gear changes because there's no gear set in here. And I feel like the synthetic shock that it gives between shifting gears feels very unnatural. And there's not really a way that I found that will turn it into just kind of that revving engine holding max RPMs. It's always fake shifting. And some people may have an issue with that, others may not. I think, again, without having a manual option, this is what's kind of holding it back from being much better than what it is. Now, if you can get over the strange transmission performance sometimes, and you drive this more conservatively, you won't notice the CVT. And I think that's positive, because between the CVT, the direct injected boxer engine without having a turbo, you're able to get 29 to 30 miles per gallon pretty much all the time, at least where I'm at elevation-wise. And that's pretty impressive when you combine the fact that you have a usable all-wheel drive system pretty much in any condition. That makes this a very compelling vehicle. It just depends on how much you want to spend, because when you get up there in price, when you max this out around like $35,000, that starts to become a tough pill to swallow. But the thing is they include things like their safety system pretty much on any model now, so you can go to the lower trim levels, be in the mid 20s to upper 20,000 range, still feel like you've got a really solid car that you can use all year round, and it's just a really positive driving experience. But let's get into the final thoughts, and I'll talk about more of the pros and cons. Final thoughts on the Subaru Forester. And after getting out of this vehicle and into several other SUVs, I can say just how much I appreciate it. So let's go over the pros and cons, many of which I've already detailed. The big one is cost. You can get into this and not be in the poorhouse, and you still get all-wheel drive. You get some of the things that you want in a hauler. And I think really that's the big thing right there. The next pro is how comfortable this vehicle is driving over every pavement type. It is just a relaxing driving experience, and the fact that it is so open, it's one of the rare types in this segment. It really is kind of stands on its own. You have great cargo capacity. You just have a lot of room to grow into it without having this monstrous vehicle or bigger vehicles that really are less practical than the Forester. Huge part. The next area is fuel economy is surprisingly good for, well, Subaru is not typically known for great fuel economy, but you will literally get over 30 miles to the gallon, and it doesn't feel like a total, like a slug on the road. Now, once we get over that and some of the good interior parts, it's time to get onto the bad stuff and the electronics. Not so much the eyesight module, because they don't use external body sensors on this car. They use the module in the front window, which makes it easier to replace, cheaper to fix. That's great, except when you get to the infotainment, the center gauge cluster, and the upper screen, there's too much going on, and namely with the physical controls on the steering wheel. This is an absolute mess. And, you know, if you're sensitive to this type of thing in a car, it might be a deal breaker. But the last negative part, really, and these are the only two things, is the electronics and the CVT. I feel like it dumbs down the experience, and it makes the car feel a lot more frumpy than it needs to be. I would hope eventually they're going to have some type of manual option, or eventually get back into the torque-converted automatic game. As it stands, having a naturally aspirated only motor and a CVT is not the best drivetrain combo if you are somebody that enjoys a driving experience outside the practicalities that the Forester provides. But that's about it. I hope this video was helpful. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Savage geese. What a waste of skin. Man, we gotta get rid of this guy. I'm gonna show you how, but first, let's tune this Subaru. I think 60 PSI should be good.
Yeah.
Let's go!